Crash Bandicoot. At last, I, the great Neocortex, have you right where I want you. And now, the final blow!
Back in September of 1996, Naughty Dog released Crash Bandicoot on the original PlayStation as the industry's first 3D platformer. After the initial trilogy though, Crash Bandicoot was passed around to different companies like Traveler's Tales and Radical Entertainment. Over time, the character saw a waning amount of success and recognition in the industry, unable to find footing as other comparable franchises evolved and changed in different ways. After more than a decade since Crash's previous entry, developer Toys for Bob, the same company responsible for bringing audiences the Spyro the Dragon remasters, is continuing the Crash franchise with a brand new game, as if nothing has happened since Naughty Dog's third entry in 1998. Crash Bandicoot 4 It's About Time is a love letter to old-school 3D platformer design in a lot of ways. However, as much as it's evident that the developers love Crash's past and want to pay the franchise tribute, a bit more work could have been done to tighten up what is here to make for a better feeling and flowing adventure on par with the first three games. Crash 4 begins after the conclusion of the third game. To escape his demise, Dr. Neocortex tears a rift in space-time, fleeing into a multiverse. Upon a successful getaway, he and his partner, Entropy, decide they'll conquer all of time and space. This leaves Crash, his sister Coco, and a new masked friend, Lanny Lowly, to venture through different time periods to stop Cortex once again, effectively fixing the fractured realities that have come to exist as a result of Cortex's wrongdoing. Over the course of the game, you'll go through lots of varied locations and eras and collect a handful of new masks. Each provides a unique and challenging ability that needs to be mastered to get past certain sections of specific levels. Whether it's making blocks appear and disappear, going upside down, spinning like a tornado, or slowing down time. All of these are an absolute joy to try out. Of all of the new mechanics in Crash 4, these masks all feel the most well-designed and are used just the right amount, so you're never tired of them. Throughout the majority of your time with Crash Bandicoot 4, you'll be playing either as Crash or Coco. These two characters play identically, so it's up to you to decide who you personally prefer to take into any given level. You'll also play as some familiar faces in the form of Dingodile, Tawna, and even Cortex himself. Tawna sports a grappling hook and wall jumping. Dingodile uses a vacuum to suck up boxes and shoot them back at enemies, and Cortex uses his ray gun to turn enemies into platforms to jump on. None of the characters are quite as much fun to play as the title characters. However, each serve to break up the pace and give you a new way to play. There are mechanical misgivings with each character, like how Tawna's grappling hook doesn't always lock onto the target it indicates, or how Dingodile's turning and aiming are heavily cumbersome, making it nearly impossible to know where you're aiming. But these characters and their levels don't come in often enough for them to be a hindrance on the overall enjoyment of the game itself, especially because the majority of these levels are optional. Additionally, finding VHS cassettes hidden in different levels unlocks flashback levels. These act as isolated puzzle rooms similar to stage bonus levels where you play as Crash. They're challenging and short, but always fun to play through. The new inverted stages, however, were less enjoyable. These stages let you replay regular levels with things altered in different ways, like the level being mirrored or having a distorted color palette. They're a challenge for those who want them, but as the game progressed, they lost their appeal. Were there more incentive to play through them, they would have been more enticing, but as they stand, they feel redundant, and only appealing for those wanting to test their resolve. At its core, Crash Bandicoot hasn't really changed how you progress through levels compared to previous outings on the original PlayStation. You'll jump over gaps, avoid roaming baddies, and collect boxes throughout each level to get Wampa Fruit. Goals have expanded beyond collecting a single crystal per level. Now, each area has a set of objectives to achieve based on factors, like whether you can get through the level without dying less than 3 times, finding a hidden gem, or collecting all the boxes. This can lead to a lot of fun replayability for each stage, and gives players satisfying options to consider. If you're dying a lot, for example, you can slow down your pace and search for boxes, and return for other gems once you're more comfortable with the level. None of the gems are required to complete the game, however earning enough gems on each level rewards new costumes, so it can be tantalizing to try to complete every challenge to change up the aesthetic of Crash or Coco to your personal tastes. In certain levels, finding all the boxes can be an exasperating and cumbersome chore. Some of the boxes are hidden in especially dastardly locations, off-camera or in the environment in ways that are really tricky to see. In my experience, bugs cause some boxes to not show up in certain levels, causing a need to replay the level 5 or 6 times. Even with the guide, it was impossible to know whether these boxes would show up or not. Certain levels also require the use of secret colored gems that can be found throughout the game, unlocking parts of levels containing extra boxes needed to get 100%. Disappointingly, there's no indication in the level select screen to know whether these gems are required or not until you're midway through an area. It can be disheartening to try and get all the boxes in these levels only to realize midway through that you'll have to come back later, feeling like you've wasted time. If you're a seasoned veteran of Crash, you may get the impression that jumping feels a little bit off due to slight but significant mechanical changes. Unlike the third game, you'll be able to double jump right off the bat in Crash 4. However, now when you jump the second time, you'll abruptly lose all of the forward momentum from the first jump, feeling like you've started a brand new jump rather than continuing one. If you're relying on muscle memory from previous outings, this takes a while to get used to. This change in momentum is more drastic and noticeable for the slide jump combos. Venture into the options menu and you'll be able to put a small radial indication on the ground showing where you'll land. Initially, I opted not to use this, but soon found that it was absolutely necessary. Unlike previous games where the camera largely stays still and follows you from the same distance the entire level, Crash 4's camera is dynamic, which means it's always moving and showing other angles than just behind or in front of your character. This can make figuring out where you're directly above from any jumps an exhaustive effort, even with the radial helper, and removes that feeling of confidence in controlling your jump. Sometimes, pressing forward actually makes you move diagonally because of the camera position. There are also many times that the game goes to a side-scrolling view. However, the game still allows you to move towards and away from the camera in these sections. Because of this, you'll be able to miss platforms or boxes if your character is behind or in front of it. Not every level suffers from this problem, but it's a prevalent enough issue that more often than not, deaths can feel more like the game's fault than a judgment of your own ability. The mechanics of jumping and sliding can be relearned and mastered with time and patience, though certain frustrations still prevail throughout the entirety of the experience. If you jump from a stationary position on ice and move in the air, you'll still slide like you're moving on the ice. This means you're unable to jump to stop and reorient yourself. There's wall running in a small set of levels, but sometimes the character just wouldn't stick to the wall when prompted. Certain levels use the returning jetboard to go across water, but unlike its previous iterations, this has such a wide turning radius that it's nearly impossible to make slight adjustments, and is tremendously frustrating to use. This lack of control can make for some of the most frustrating levels of the entire game. Crash Bandicoot was the first game I remember getting really good at as a kid. I spent hours mastering the jumps and the levels of the original trilogy. Ever since then, Crash has definitely had highs and lows. Each game has its fans and its own appeal, regardless of the team working on them. Crash Bandicoot 4, It's About Time is a clear love letter to the franchise, and it's apparent that the team has collectively spent just as much time and investment with these games as I and many other fans have. Crash 4 is a lot of fun, but is also incredibly frustrating because of minor mechanical hiccups that add up over time. While I wish that the jumping could have been ironed out just a bit, the camera would calm down, and that the game would stop having certain villain characters tell me jokes during a level when I'm trying to focus on a challenging jump. What's here feels like the fresh start that Crash has needed for a long time. Crash is back, and is only going to get better. Technical squabbles aside, sitting on the couch and smashing some boxes can carry that same joy that those entries had back in 1998, and Toys for Bob knows how to extract that joy like few other developers since the original team. Only time will tell if a sequel will iron out the present issues to make for a more polished and precise platformer like the original trilogy. However, looking at the good in this entry, it appears Toys for Bob is up to the task.